Hello everyone, welcome to the Applications Manager free training series. Let me quickly walk you through the agenda. So we'll start with auto discovery of servers and how you could map the dependencies via Prometheus integration. And this is the Prometheus integration. This is the first time that we are going to discuss in this training series, and I'll be giving you live real-time insights of the same. The next step of monitoring would be once the components or once the servers were discovered, we create a dependencies. Next one, that is monitoring the key performance metrics across every layer of your IT infrastructure. Once the metrics were discovered, the third part we'll be discussing on the detecting the anomalies with AI assisted smart alerts. That is finding the alerts based on the specific patterns, and we'll be focusing more on adaptive based thresholds. And finally, trend analysis reports with machine learning enabled analytics for forecasting specific metrics or KPIs, which definitely creates hurdles in terms of IT operations. So let's start with the first topic, auto discovery of the servers. So before we start with the auto discovery, I just wanted to give a quick overview of what monitoring actually does and why monitoring is required. As we all know that more nowadays, the technology shift has been pushed from mainframe systems to the on-premise, and from on-premise to the cloud and hybrid cloud, and now it is more of mix of container-based and orchestrations platforms and Kubernetes, OpenShift. So the technology shift is more of towards the containers. So as technology shift is completely towards the containers, deployment of containers in a DevOps system, in a very large complex system, involves multiple containers, that is hundreds or thousands of containers in fact. So keeping a track of all these containers, that is containers, servers, the application components like web server, database, and the interdependencies between one node and other node is what important. If there is if any one of the link is down, if the dependency is down, then the entire application might be impacted, or even a specific workflow or a functionality would be impacted. So it is important to keep a track on all the metrics of the components. That is, when we talk with the any specific IT infrastructure systems, it involves a mix of both, as I said, public and private cloud. So application itself, again, it consists of multiple layers. Applications access from a browser in a different network layer, and again on top of that data center, we have a security enforcement, something like a firewall, and the configuration of firewall is again important there. And the application layer, that is the session layer, where actually the transaction with the end user happens, and finally the business outcomes of the application. So keeping a track of all these components is again most important. And these metrics, right, it will be pushed from a monitoring solution, and this data will be processed by the data analysis engine of the monitoring solution, and we can get started. That is alerting and API and the unified dashboard. And then finally the remediation part comes. Once the tool captures the data, and it processes the data with the machine learning and alerting capabilities, and then it finds a trend on what exactly the problematic scenario. Say for example, disk utilization is high, or disk utilization has breached a specific component. Then what next? Automation. And when to do an automation is the next question, right? So what type of automations can be performed? In Application Manager, we support various automation components, which includes incident response, resource scaling, and incident response would be something like triggering an alerts from the app manager to any ITSM solution like ServiceNow or Service Desk Plus, or you can in fact could provide security enforcement. Cost optimization can be definitely controlled with the help of predictive analytics mechanism. So let's quickly start with that. So hope now the users would have got a basic overview of why monitoring is required and how we can get started with this is what we'll be focusing on. So without much theoretical concepts, I'll quickly jump on to the practical aspects of the solution. So why discovery is required? What's the capability of discovery? As an IT administrator, I have deployed 500 Linux machines and 500 Windows machines and 1000 VMs. Okay, I'm responsible. My work is I'm responsible for the uptime of all these 1500 devices. Okay, because all these 1500 devices were hosting the critical workload of my entire production, financial, or application. If there is any downtime, definitely that creates brand reputation loss. And not only the brand reputation loss, the customer experience would be definitely impacted. And I couldn't, I just as an administrator or as an application owner, I just wanted to delight the customers with the performance of my application, and the SLA is what important, right? So how to get started with this? From the monitoring perspective, first step is discovery of the components. Once it is discovered, configuration and monitoring, then analyzing and the reporting. And this cycle repeats. From the application manager perspective, we support multiple types of dependencies: IP-based discovery, network discovery, and VMware-based discovery. And in fact, bulk automation, in case if you have servers across multiple subnets, right? Then in that case, you might have to create separate profiles. In order to overcome such scenarios, we have a bulk importing functionality, which helps you to just upload the sheet, and application manager in a single shot discover all your servers, and you can immediately start with the monitoring, and and specifically no additional training is required. All this is quite simple, and I can quickly show you that from the product as a demonstration perspective. Hope this is clear. Please let me know if you have any other questions, or please type in the chat panel. Our panelists will be happy to answer those questions. So once these components, once it is discovered, once your servers, network, application components were discovered, we create a dependency. Okay, as I mentioned, I am responsible for 1500 servers. Okay, and all these 1500 servers were hosting thousands of database and thousands of application servers, thousands of web servers. If the connection time in the database is increasing, okay, that creates an impact with the authenticated functionality mechanism of my application. So how to find that this connect, if the response time of a specific SQL has a direct impact with the application authentication. Okay, so if the application authentication is getting failed, then users will simply they will just try to log in, and they will get a message saying that unable to process your request, or could not process your request, something that they will say. But how to troubleshoot the issue right from a proactive way instead of troubleshooting from the backend way? That is what we traditionally do. The IT admins, what process they follow is, now that they get an login failure saying that username couldn't, they just go back and troubleshoot. They find whether the database connectivity is up and running. Then they find in which node the database is hosted, and then they find if there is any latency sync between multiple nodes. Okay, all this requires a backward troubleshooting. By this time, okay, the end user experience will be definitely impacted. So we definitely don't want that cost to be, and wanted to be in a proactive side of preventing your IT infrastructure. That is, you can identify the application's issues faster, and in fact, you could get instant root cause diagnosis for quicker troubleshooting. So this is what you get as a benefits. So now let me quickly switch to the product and can show you how we can get started with this. Applications Manager is an on-premise solution. Once the tool is installed, you could access the tool using its host name and port number. And this is how the UI looks like. And to get started with the discovery mechanism, all you have to do is on the top right hand, choose settings. Upon choosing settings, in the discovery and data collection, in the left hand side, we have add and discover. So choose this option. And now choose discovery as an option, and here it provides multiple workflows to get started with. So all we have to do is choose add new, and right here choose name. That is, we are providing a unique name for this discovery profile. That's it. So, and credential list, and how the discovery should go. That is, we support 3 types of discovery. Discovery based on IP range, that is start and stop range. and then again CIDR, which is nothing but classless interdomain routing based discovery, and finally the VMware based discovery. That would be suitable in case if your environment is completely depending on the VM stack, then you could go with that option. So to get to how we discover, right? So now that we provide the IP from and to range. So how with that we could ping the devices, but how do we connect to that server, right? Then we would need to log in remotely. So how do we do that? So in that specific case, you could choose add new credential right here. And here you will get a pop-up something like this. And right here you could choose the technology. You could add a credential. So these are all the application components supported for discovery. Let's assume that I just want to discover uh, Postgres, okay, Postgres database. In that case, I just provide the username and password of the Postgres and the database name, and I save it and specify the IP range of the servers where that Postgres is residing. It's not only applicable for Postgres, but also you could use for other technologies. There is no limitations. From and to is what we provide, and you can get started with that. The moment, in case some administrator would ask a question, hey, stop, or I am using a different port number. How this tool will discover in case if I'm using a customized port? That's a valid question. The answer here is we have this configure port option where you could specify the port number. In case if you're using customized port numbers, then you can also specify port numbers in a comma separated values. It's completely possible. Or in case if you don't want to discover any specific components, you could just exclude that from the discovery profile by just choosing this one, disable. Okay. Hope this is clear with the participants. So now let me go with the next option of bulk importing. Okay, so this option will be pretty helpful in case if you are having servers like thousands of servers in different subnets. In that case, specifying the IPs might not be an viable solution. Okay, and that would lead to triage. So what should we do in that specific case, right? Just choose the type here. Say for example, I just want to download, I want to upload my hundreds of Exchange servers. Okay, the moment you choose Exchange server, in this help card, you could find an example CSV file. Download this file, just fill in the details of the inventory as per the format that which we have specified, and then upload it right here. Choose next, then it will automatically parse the details and get started with the Exchange server monitoring. So this is quite simple as such. And the other way of discovery profile is adding the components manually by choosing its type. Say this is how the new enhanced revamped page of application manager add view monitor page looks like, wherein we did a lot of front-end enhancements. So here on the left hand side you could find the types. Say as an admin, as a DB admin, I just want to discover my database server. In that case, you can choose database server. Let's assume that it's going to be an MS SQL server, Microsoft SQL. Choose MS SQL type over there. And now specify the details of the SQL. And this option is specifically helpful in case if you want to discover the servers or SQL devices one by one. Okay? If I wanted to do it in a bulk, then the other options which I have mentioned like bulk import or discovery and dependency mapping would help. So fill in the details of the SQL server, specify the driver details, whatever driver which requires for connectivity. Then the moment you choose add monitor, the SQL server will be discovered in a single shot. Now, let me just start off showing you and how a dependency mapping looks like. Okay. Previously, I have shown that we provide the details and discover. Okay, I just wanted to show you in a real time. So let me just choose discover. I'll add a component right here and name something like this. And I'll provide the IP range, something for example, 0 and right here I want to discover 30 IPs and I specify 30 and choose discover and add. The moment we choose discover and add, the page looks like this, wherein in the backend, it tries to discover the devices and it created dependencies. So the user might ask a question, now that it will discover and show the performance statistics, but how the dependency looks like. Okay? As I was showing, there were multiple components, then there were a chain of dependencies between one device and the other device. How to find? So I'm choosing home on the top left hand side. The moment I choose home, I'm just choosing business view, which is for an example, just to show you and how just to show you a glimpse of how this discovery mechanism looks like. So once it is discovered, since I'm just giving it as an example, it creates this application manager server is depending on these components as a sub dependencies. That is, it is depending on Windows Server, Postgres, and Tomcat, and PGSQL, and URL. Okay, this is a basic URL. If any of these has any issue, then definitely my application manager app will have an issue, which is already indicated right here, saying that the Tomcat server health is critical, so on. So by this way, the moment you discover if it's hundreds of servers, all those hundreds of servers will be interconnected with each others and will show you the dependencies. Hope this is clear with the participants. And here you could also customize your options, something like view settings, and choose display properties. And once you create the views, you should be able to customize the views as per your requirements with a specific level of customization options. So now let me switch back to the presentation. Now we have discussed about the regular discovery profile options, that is network discovery and bulk imports and manual way of importing the devices. This is a fresh feature that we have released recently, that is discovery of the Tomcat server via Prometheus. I hope majority of the attendees would be aware of Prometheus, as this is an open source solution for it's for KPIs scrapping. So how this Prometheus server works, something like a Prometheus server has a deployment, resource deployment, and the exporter is what pulls the data from the specific resource, and those details will be specified in YAML file of specific Prometheus server, and it pushes the data to the Prometheus server, and where the data will be shown in a key value format, and this data will be shown in a key value format for better understanding in a time data series. And then from Prometheus server APIs and Prometheus server's curl, we have two types of data collection to get the data from Prometheus to the applications manager. Okay, so why this Prometheus monitoring is important? This Prometheus acts as an open source, okay, which helps you to get those information. In that specific case, no additional connectivity to this specific target machines is not required, as the data will be directly gathered from the Prometheus server for easy understanding. Okay, so which doesn't require direct connectivity. This would be quite helpful in a closed and in a decentralized zone. And Prometheus servers can be completely containerized. Okay, and it completely supports the container environments. So in that case, you're deploying hundreds of Kubernetes clusters. So those can be easily discovered automatically. So at this point in time, application manager supports Tomcat server discovery alone via Prometheus server. But in the future, we have plan to add Kubernetes and those in our product roadmap. So now let me switch back to the product and show you how to get started with this Prometheus integration. To start with this Prometheus integration, choose settings. In the discovery and data collection, choose add discover. In the settings, in the product settings, choose add-on settings. And right here, the list of Third-party integration add-ons will be shown, which includes like Prometheus, ServiceNow, Alarms One, Services plus Cloud, and Slack, and other third-party integrations will be shown. To start the discovery from Prometheus, choose plus icon right here, that is add, and then you will be taken to this workflow wherein you could just specify the display name just for the unique identification of the administrators, and the polling interval, that is every 10 minutes that you want to get the data from the Prometheus server, or every 5 minutes that you want to get the data from the Prometheus server. You just specify those details, and then Prometheus server details is what most important, from where, what's the target endpoint of Prometheus. So that you can specify Prometheus API port and endpoints. So if you're not sure about the Prometheus API port, you could verify that from the Prometheus configuration file and those information, and the endpoint address and authentication details to connect with the Prometheus. As we support two modes of data collection, the data will be exposed from the Prometheus via Prometheus APIs and the curl through SSH. In case if we are using curl through SSH as an option, in that case SSH connection details has to be specified right here, so that we can connect to that server using the curl SSH based commands and we can get those data. So one more prerequisite right here is, if we are using curl based SSH, then the curl CLI tool must be installed in the machine where you have configured SSH. The curl CLI tool must be installed if it is SSH. In case if it is API, then from where the monitoring happens, the exposure to the APIs should be available. So these are all the only prerequisites to get started, and discovery specifications can be provided right here. So as of now that we have brought support for the Tomcat server discovery, you could just choose Tomcat server, and in the future Kubernetes and other container-based environment systems and microservices-based systems will be supported. That's what we'll be currently focusing on. And discovery and monitoring, that is how to discover past discovery and specific instances that you want to discover, and here's the specific instances. You could go specify those information and what happens. Okay, action on monitor if data is not available, what should we do? Monitor as down, then yes, and manage monitor, or that means stop the data collection for a specific time, then delete monitor, yes. Hope this is clear with the Prometheus way of discovery. Let me switch back to the presentation and let's start with the other topics. Monitoring the key metrics in your server and VM environment. So as I've said, this DevOps environment is more of complex, which involves multiple level of servers, multiple containers, multiple Docker systems. So few servers will be on cloud, few servers on premise, mix of both. How to manage those? How to find if that's an issue? Proactive way of troubleshooting is important. So previously I gave an example that user is unable to log in, and once we find, we were drilled down and found that due to a latency or due to a sync server disconnect between the two nodes, the exposure to the authenticator APIs failed. As the exposure to the authenticator APIs failed, the authentication has been failed. So this level of pinpointing the root cause is what important in a proactive approach. Okay, application itself is depending, it's installed. Application is a platform installed on top of any servers and an operating system. So where the operating system is residing on? Operating system is residing on a specific hardware, because the hardware is what is capable of serving the request for the operating system. There is an intermediate language between the operating system and hardware, which translates the request and to the hardware, and it processes the request, and again it goes back to the operating system. On top of operating system, your application is residing, and after application we have a network and where the users get connected to it. So identifying the hardware level of hardware fault is the first most important task. That is hardware failures like temperature, power, fan, and CPU core speed. So these score temperatures. So these level of metrics acts as an important point, because if there is any hardware problems, definitely it would impact the operating system and the application will be impacted. As an application is impacted, end user experience is impacted. And again, finally, the network layer, right? So the network is where the actual request from the application to the end user goes. Without network, from the application to the end user cannot reach your application. If there is any misconfiguration in the network, configuration level issues, or any routing table mismatch, or DHCP servers exceeding the IP allocated, okay, these I'm just providing common typical reasons, but there could be hundreds of reasons, okay, constituting an issue on why your application is facing issues. To find those and effective monitoring end to end, that is monitoring the full stack systems is what important, so that you can keep a track on every components: CPU, memory, disk, hardware, to find that the authenticator service goes down between, because the one of the node goes down. Why the node goes down? Because the memory allocated has breached. If we know that the memory is going to breach before, we could have prevented. As a result, the end user experience would have been protected. So that's what that we need to focus. Let me take you to the product GUI, and I can show you a few key metrics to get started in terms of infrastructure monitoring. So we are in the application manager GUI now, choosing the monitors right there. And let's take one of my Windows server as an example. In Application Manager, the Windows Server discovery will be in two different modes, WMI and SNMP. This server which I have discovered is via WMI mode, and this is what the metrics that I get. So being a proactive monitoring solution, it definitely gives you all the data, that is CPU utilization, what's the memory utilization and the disk utilization. All those details will be shown right here. Okay. So it's just that we have to configure. The effective configuration of the solution is more important. Now that we know that we have discovered the component, now that we have monitoring systems in place, but when we should get alerts, when we should not get alerts, and when corrective remediation should be performed, what value should I set as threshold? So these questions will be a primary question for any administrators. They could ask. The answer is very simple. This varies environment specific, but a typical reason, okay, a typical example would be if your environment, right, contains, just check the historical data of your environments, check how it goes. Based on that, you can define a static threshold. Okay, that's going to be a static threshold. But in the upcoming slides, I'll probably explain you on how to set up an adaptive threshold, where the threshold itself adapts to your environment behavior for alerting. That would be good, so that you can filter the unwanted alerts and protect your systems. So that's what we'll be focusing on. This is how, once the discovery is done, and you can get the key performance metrics like memory, disk, page memory usage statistics, page reads and writes, breakup of the CPU utilization, run queue details, and all those metrics will be available right there. Okay, so as we support a number of performance metrics for configuration, so as an administrator, you could quickly get those metrics and perform the deep monitoring right there. So now let me switch back to the presentation. Detecting the anomalies with AI-assisted smart alerts. So AI is nothing but artificial intelligence. So how we are leveraging artificial intelligence to raise smart alerts. So as an administrator, let me take you through this use case, that you're responsible for managing an e-commerce application, okay, which stores the audit logs, and the audit log, where it resides in one of your partition. Okay, if this partition exceeds the maximum allocated capacity, then alert is sent. Now, IT operator will move the logs to a different partition to free up the disk space. This is a manual case where this has been performed. Okay, and by this time, the application again continuously generate the logs. Again, it fills up, and the application will be crashed at one point in time. So, an effective IT automation system should be in place to prevent these kind of errors. That is, now that I know that this usage exceeds 80%, yes, this is what exactly happens. Then create a scripting such a way that it moves the partition, or it moves the unwanted files, or scrap the unwanted files from one drive to another file, or just archive the files, right? So these type of automation should be performed to reduce your downtime. And one more important thing that I just wanted to inform all the participants: whenever I speak with any IT admins across the globe, they most of the admins or NOC team members say they are using 4 different solutions, 4 different monitoring tools itself. We are not sure which data to trust, or we get a confusion that this tool raises alert and this tool doesn't raise an alert. Okay. So how to prevent these kind of scenarios, right? So analyzing the data from the multiple sources is definitely a challenge. Okay. So configuration is what helps you to prevent these kind of scenario. In one tool, a tool alert would have been raised if the system is not reachable. If your point, if your target endpoint server is not reachable, then it raises an alert. But doesn't mean that your server is down. It is just that the connectivity is down. So you just have to configure the tool accordingly to prevent such kind of scenarios, right? So analyzing the data from multiple sources access is a challenge, and all these application components. Okay, Windows will output the logs to a separate location. Tomcat server will output the log to a separate location. SQL server will output the log to a separate location. So how do I correlate to find this front-end transaction is affected because of all these back-end issues? So that's something that we need to focus on. So by having a unified monitoring solution, okay, with Applications Manager, you could completely overcome those scenarios. So these are common challenges faced by the traditional systems. Like you get multiple alerts, you're not sure, you get continuous alerts, what needs to be performed, okay, automation needs to be done, but not sure what automation needs to be performed. Okay. So now let's see how these could be optimized in terms of alerting, and how to filter the unwanted alerts and prioritize the events that admins should focus, pinpoint the cause, automate using any script or container-based orchestration, because anyway, as a tool, it supports multiple levels of automation, and apart from that, additional level of customization is also possible. Now just let me switch back to the product. So we are in the App Manager UI now. As I explained, alerting is completely based on the threshold that we are defining it right there. We just create a threshold by choosing new threshold profile right there, and provide a name for this threshold, something like this, and then create threshold. Then specify the value and create a threshold. Now that the threshold has been created, okay, where should I associate, or when this threshold should be active, to which performance metric this threshold should be applied? That's a question. So as an administrator, if you are server admin, the key performance metrics would be like server, the CPU memory disk, process or services up and down status. Configure the alarms for those and just leave it to the tool. If it breaches the value, then the tool will immediately alert. Now the next question. This is a static value. After 6 p.m., if the server just goes, if there is a CPU spike just intermittently, I just don't want an alert, because my users will be logged off and no one will be accessing my application post 6 p.m. because it's non-business hours. I don't want the alert. In that case, this way of static threshold profile might not be helpful. So what should we do is then an alternate approach. View threshold profiles, and right here we have standard. That's what we have focused on. Like CPU, if it is 90%, it sends an alert warning. If it is equal to 70, it sends an alert. If it is lesser than 88 or 50, it sends a clear alert. So this is how it works for these mechanisms. Now, adaptive. The name itself indicates that it is adaptive. The threshold itself adaptive in nature to various circumstances. So you can just click here to create one, and this way of alerting will be based on two different conditions based on baseline value that defines as a standard baseline value, and next option is the custom expression and set baseline date range, that is data collection comparison time. So let me just, before I explain all these things, why adaptive profile is required is what I mentioned, but how this works. Now that we get an alert based on static way, this way of alerting, say the CPU utilization is 70% now, okay, and the threshold is defined as baseline value previous week. So the previous week, what's going to be the baseline value, that is the average value. The current or collected data will be compared with the last hour, I mean the previous week value. So but it is not always the previous week. Here you could choose the criteria based upon your requirements, and if you want the data comparison, or if you want to train the data set based on a specific custom expression, the data model can be trained by the custom expression values, and this values would be 10 days moving value average, that is last 10 days moving value average compared with the current collected data, and raise an alert by it compares the last week data with the current time, and the threshold itself is capable of fluid in nature to adjust to the data patterns. If there is any 2% deviation, then send me an alert. If there is 5% deviation, then send me a critical alert. By that way we could define. So here you don't have to explicitly specify a defined criteria like 70, 80, 90, 95. It's not required. If there is 5% deviation, send me an alert. Here is just going to be a standard deviation based values, because the data collection will be completely based on historical data analysis based on the machine learning processing algorithms. So now let's switch back to the presentation. The threshold profiles with machine learning is what I have explained, and I'll show you a way on how this could be defined for a specific node. And as I mentioned, application manager acts as a complete or a unified platform to perform all this monitoring, to process the data, and then engage this data to any other tools with the help of webhooks, REST APIs, Slack, yes, and perform an analysis. So, you could perform an automation. That's as I mentioned. It contains three different disciplines inside the monitoring itself: server management, application performance management, and then automation. With a unified way, and doesn't require you to switch to multiple solutions, because all these can be integrated in a single tool itself. Before I start with the next topic of analyzing the trends with the machine learning enabled analytics, let me go back and show you on how to configure a machine learning based alerts. So choose configure alarms right there. I'm choosing URL and choose a specific metric right there, and I'm choosing the connection time as the performance metric, and here it gives me two different options in the alarms. Associate threshold. This gives you the standard and adaptive threshold profiles can be listed, and adding to that machine learning. So if you choose this option, what happens? Okay, and whether can I use this option or not? Yes, you can use this option. Let me explain what this option does. If you use machine learning, it compares again the current value with the minimum of last 30 days data. So in order to reduce noise for these type of machine learning based alerts, it is quite important that the device should be added at least 30 days before, so that the noise will be less with the alerts. Because I can tell the device is stable or abnormal if I know the historical data pattern. So that's the reason that this minimum 30 days level of data is required. Okay. And here we are not specifying any static or manual values. We are just choosing a machine learning and just leave it to the tool. It will compare and raise the alerts. I mean, hope this is clear with the participants. Please feel free to ask if you have any questions in the chat panel so that we can point you in the right direction. Now we go back to the presentation again. Analyzing the trends with capacity planning and forecasting reports. So capacity planning in the architecture level itself, it is quite important, because assuming that I'm planning to deploy, I'm planning to go live, my application, production application is going to go live by next week. In this case, I have already tested my application with 100 servers and that worked fine. But whether will it work in the production system? Because the real-time user is what will be flooding the application. I'll be getting huge number of unexpected requests in a specific time. Will my servers capable of handling those requests? So what would we do traditionally? We go live, and if we get huge number of requests to the web server or any component, say for example, if the Apache server is what deployed for as a web server front backend, if the server is crashing with huge number of requests, then the administrator team immediately allocate more memory to this Apache server. So here two problems. Allocating memory is not a problem, but allocating the memory in abundance is a problem. Or in fact, allocating the memory or not allocating the memory or scarcity of a memory is a problem. How do I find then how do I find the right memory value? Once you have added the device or application to a monitoring solution, analyze its historical data patterns. So you know that this is the time. This is going to be the time where the user spike will be high. Then a lot of scaling automations could be performed, where at that point in time memory could be allocated and it could be revoked again. So these kind of capacity planning helps the IT administrator not to be relaxed and watch your IT systems. And forecasting again important. Now that you just plan the servers, like you have already planned that hundreds of servers is required for this server, or again I need to add few more servers. Capacity planning is done at the enterprise level. Forecasting. I am planning as an e-commerce based application. We are planning for a sale for a specific event or specific show. At that point in time, the traffic to this server will be high, which we know at that point in time it's predicted. So how do I forecast these kind of scenarios? Based on the predictive analysis mechanism, you could find the growth and get the trends. So let's see on how we can configure this from the applications manager. I'll switch back to the UI now, and right here you choose reports. In the reports left hand side, choose capacity planning, and right there we have select servers option. Here we could choose the servers. Right now I have added Windows alone, so that it's showing the Windows, but if you have added any type, it will be showing those. Choose undersized servers, and this will help you to find the servers whichever is undersized. Okay, A server is called undersized, which means its resources like CPU, memory, and disk are consistently overused, or it is exceeding for a certain period of time. If a resource is exceeding for a certain period of time, if I allocated 50 servers and all my 50 servers, which is responsible for production server, were always undersized, then what should administrator should do? He should add few more servers or tweak the hardware of your existing servers so that you could allocate more number of CPU cores, allocate more CPU processors, allocate more memory. So these kind of remediation action should be performed if you have more number of undersized servers. And how application manager detects the undersized server. Okay, so for that, servers undersized if the percentage. This is completely based on this server diagnosis rule here. Change settings used in diagnosis, select rule, and servers are undersized if the percentage of the time. Here you could specify the values, conditions used in diagnosis of the undersized server, that is CPU, memory, and disk. So you could specify these values right here to get started. And based on this criteria, we filter that this server is undersized, this server is oversized, and this server is idle. Oversized means the server is not utilized. I have just, for in a place of 50 servers handling my web application, I have allocated 100 servers, then remaining 50 servers were of no use, and I am spending much. Cost optimization can be definitely in control. So this is what important over there. Hope this is clear with the participants with the example. And now forecast report. So when we choose forecast report, as the name itself indicates that we are forecasting something. What we are forecasting. So here you could choose the type of machine. Say for example, I'm choosing database server, I'm choosing Postgres. I'm forecasting the disk utilization or of these servers. We choose, say for example, choose this server as example, choose this metric, and right there you will get the data which would look something like this. So how would I predict, how would I read this report? Well, that's the next question. Now that I have shown you the report, and the last week, this average, okay, that's not the last week, this average was 33.68% for this disk. 20th April, it was 31%. By 5th May, that is today, it is 34. By 5th June, it is expected to be 90%. Okay, so this is what the disk growth that is expected based on the data patterns. So here you could choose the criteria if you want 1 month or 2 month, 3 month or 4 month, specify over there, and this is how you get it. Because if you want to toggle between the machine learning and between the normal data analytics, you just enable or disable right there, it will help you to get it started. So hope this is clear to participants, and you can again download this report, email this report using the scheduled capacity planning reports. So this is what help you in a long time operational monitoring, that is for NOC and server monitoring team members. Back to the presentation. Now that we have discussed about capacity planning, enterprise forecast reporting also we have discussed. Almost we come to the end of the session. Well, let me just give you a quick recap of what we have discussed. Initially, we started this session with automating the application discovery. That is how you could get started with the discovery using the bulk import, application automatic discovery and dependency mapping. And then we have discussed about a new feature which is released in the solution, which is discovery of the servers via Prometheus integration and the various modes involved in the Prometheus integration. The prerequisites is what we have discussed, and monitoring your physical and virtual servers. As this tool access and centralized solution, monitoring physical, virtual, on-premise, hybrid cloud, containers in a single place. You just don't have to switch to multiple solutions to correlate the data, aggregate the data. So that's not required. And configuring the AI-based alerts. Then why AI-based alerts is required? To filter the unwanted alerts and prioritize the specific events which requires immediate attention. Analyze utilization and growth reports of capacity planning. That's where we have discussed about the enterprise capacity planning and how this can be utilized through inside your IT operations, and growth reports for capacity planning also. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.